In this video, I'm going to talk about this quite interesting piece of vinyl from my collection. It's not an album by my new favourite band, it's actually a podcast captured on vinyl. But before I talk more about this, I'm going to talk about spoken word albums. There is more to vinyl than just music. There are many types of spoken word albums out there as well. Spoken word albums have been around since the first sounds were recorded back in the 1800s. And Grammys have been given out for the best spoken word album since 1959, back when they were known as the Gramophone Awards. In 1943 there was a Broadway production of Othello released on record, running at 2 hours 8 minutes. It wasn't released on a 12-inch album running at 33 1/3, which would hold up to 22 minutes per side, like we would expect nowadays, but was in fact released on 78 RPM records. Now those 78s, made from shellac, could only hold about 4 minutes per side, and they wanted to release the whole play, so that ended up being an 18-piece record set, and it still didn't have the entire performance. It was later re-released as a 3-piece LP set. There are many Doctor Who albums on vinyl available to buy. Some are soundtracks, some are entire stories, such as this one that was released just this month. It's called The Energy of the Daleks. It was an original episode written in 2011 and features the 4th Doctor. It was released on blue vinyl. It was originally recorded in 2011 and released on CD in 2012. If you're a Doctor Who fan, then what better way to own an audio-only story than on your own vinyl copy? There was an album release featuring Elvis live on stage in 1974, except all the music was cut out, just leaving Elvis generally messing about and telling jokes. Elvis's manager put it together so he could release an album using the name Elvis without running foul of the rights that RCA Records owned at the time. Unfortunately, a lot of the album doesn't make any sense because Elvis is referenced in songs that you can't even hear. Monty Python released 14 albums on vinyl. Although some contain music, most of it was spoken word. I'm lucky enough to own one of their albums. It's called Monty Python's Contractual Obligation album. It was released in 1980. It had this name because they had one last album to record before their contract ended with their record company. It contains new material, interspersed with old material from before Monty Python were even together. It also features material from post-Python Eric Idle series, Rutland Weekend Television. It was their first studio recording in over 7 years. The album was nominated for a Grammy Award in 1981. There have been many stand-up comedy albums released as well, such as Richard Pryor, Is It Something I Said from 1975, and Robin Williams, Reality, What a Concept from 1979. But more recently, Netflix have begun releasing their stand-up specials on vinyl. Sarah Silverman released We Are Miracles in 2013 on the Netflix label, and just last year in 2017 there were releases from Jerry Seinfeld with Jerry Before Seinfeld, Norm Macdonald with Hitler's Dog, Gossip and Trickery, and Amy Schumer with The Leather Special. There have also been books released on vinyl. In the 50s and 60s, books were mostly released on 7-inch that ran at 16 2/3 RPM. This format ran too slow for a decent sound, so that's why it was mainly used for spoken word recordings. This format was perfect for use with what they called talking books for the blind. One such release was Treasure Island in 1958 that came on vinyl, also playing at 16 2/3 RPM on 7-inch vinyl in an 8-piece set. The 16 RPM format was actually quite obscure, so although people had the ability to play it on their record players at the time, most people didn't actually own 16 RPM records. You also needed a special needle. Eventually, record players dropped the ability to be able to actually play them. These days, Hatchet Audio and Harper Audio are releasing books on vinyl. One that's been released this year by Harper Audio is a book by Joe Hill, the son of Stephen King. It's an audiobook of a short story called Dark Carousel. It comes in a 2-piece LP set on splattered coloured vinyl. Only a handful of podcasts have released vinyl-only versions. The first podcast to be released was Tell 'em Steve Dave on the 16th of April 2011. It's a comedy podcast with Brian Quinn from Impractical Jokers, with Brian Johnson and Walt Flanagan from the TV show Comic Book Man. It was later followed up with Vinylcast 2, the birthday roast of Brian Quinn, in 2016. But my favourite spoken word record is No Such Thing as a Fish podcast. This came out in 2015 and it was the first of the UK podcasts to be released on vinyl. I think it's a great way to keep something tangible that you can own of your favourite podcast. The 4 members of the Fish team are Dan Schreiber, Anna Jasinski, James Harkin and Andrew Hunter Murray. For those of you that don't know, QI is a British panel show shown on the BBC, where panellists are asked questions that are very obscure and hard to answer, but are quite interesting, hence the name QI. You can visit their website for more information. The Elves, as all the researchers on QI are known as, decided it would be a good idea to make a podcast featuring 4 facts that they'd had that week that hadn't made it into the show, but still warranted more attention. I think the podcast is extremely informative and very, very funny. Since it started, the podcast has had over 20 million listeners. It's won various awards and has toured throughout the UK. And I was lucky enough to see them myself a couple of years ago. They've recently taken their tour to Australia as well. The vinyl itself features a specially recorded podcast, never to be heard elsewhere. The cover is the No Such Thing as a Fish logo, using an eye-catching black and yellow striped design. It's a coloured record in bright yellow. It features the facts: Swiss cheese is losing its holes. There is a ski shop in the middle of the Sahara. The world's only firework boxing match took place in London in 1937. And you have a cell in your brain specifically dedicated to Jennifer Aniston. And as a bonus, there's an appearance from Slipknot frontman Corey Taylor. He's a fan of the podcast and has appeared on it before, bringing along his own fact. When you buy this album, you get access to a download of 52 episodes, which covers the first year of the podcast. The record also features their theme tune. It's called Wasps by Emperor Yes, whose lead singer Ash Gardner has also appeared on the podcast. The track is from an album called An Island Called Earth, which was released in 2014. The No Such Thing as a Fish team have now released what looks like a cassette. It actually features a hidden USB stick and it contains all the episodes from year 2, so that's another 52 episodes, plus a specially filmed episode at their offices in Covent Garden, London. Maybe next they'll release an actual cassette, that would be awesome. So, to sum things up, there's more to vinyl and collecting vinyl than you might have thought. I hope I've told you some things you didn't already know, and maybe given you some ideas for your next vinyl purchase. That's it for now, hope to see you again soon.